The dust tasted like iron and regret. Silas Harding spat, the grit clinging stubbornly to his tongue. He's been tasting a lot of that lately. 3 days he's been tracking the skin again, 3 days of relentless sun, and 3 days closer to the grave. If he was honest with himself, he wasn't a young man anymore. 42 felt like 60 in this blasted territory. Copper Canyon had been a quiet town, relatively speaking. Enough trouble with cattle rustlers and drunken brawls to keep the sheriff busy, but nothing that required a bounty hunter of Silas's caliber. Then the Skinners came. 5 men, led by a man who moved with the cold efficiency of a rattlesnake and the cruelty of a desert storm. They robbed the First National Bank, killing old Mr. Abernathy in the process, a man whose kindness and generosity were known throughout the territory. The governor himself had offered a hefty reward, and Silas, needing the money and feeling a twinge of something akin to a conscience, had taken the job. He found them near Rattlesnake Wash, camped amongst the towering sandstone cliffs. 5 men, just as the telegraph had indicated. He circled them once, assessing their positions, their weaponry. Younger than him, all of them, full of that youthful arrogance that comes from believing you've got all the time in the world. He's seen the look before. It never ends well. Silas moved silently, a shadow amongst the rocks. He had a Winchester lever-action rifle well oiled and ready. He's also carried a Colt Peacemaker strapped to his hip, more for show than anything these days. He's learned over the years that a man's reputation often does more damage than a bullet. He's heard tales of men who froze in terror just at the sight of him. That was before his reflexes dulled, his eyesight blurred. He wasn't looking for glory. He was looking for enough money to buy a small farm back in Missouri, far from the dust and violence. A place where he could plant something green, something that didn't wither under the merciless sun. The youngest of the Skinners, a boy barely old enough to shave, was on watch. He spotted Silas first. The boy let out a yell, scrambling for his rifle. Silas didn't hesitate. A single shot cracked the stillness of the desert. The boy crumpled to the ground, his rifle clattering against the rocks. "Skinners, come up with your hands up," Silas yelled, his voice rough from the dust and the long silence. The remaining 4 emerged from their makeshift camp, their faces a mixture of anger and fear. The leader, the man named Khalid Skinner, stepped forward, his eyes narrowed. He was taller than Silas, with a scar that ran across his left cheek. "You've got a lot of nerve, old man," Skinner said, his voice low and menacing. "You think you can just waltz in here and take us down?" "I'm just doing my job," Silas replied, keeping his Winchester trained on Skinner. "The law wants you." "The law ain't got nothing to do with this," Skinner spat. "This is a matter of business." "It's a matter of murder," Silas corrected. "And robbery. And defying the governor's justice." A tense standoff ensued. The desert air shimmered with heat and unspoken threats. Silas could feel the sweat trickling down his back, itching beneath his worn shirt. He knew Skinner was looking for an opening, waiting for him to make a mistake. Then a movement caught his eye. Behind Skinner, partially concealed by a rock outcropping, another figure emerged. A Native American woman, her face painted with intricate patterns, her eyes sharp and watchful. She held a bow, an arrow nocked and drawn. Silas recognized her. It was Walks with Shadows, a respected member of the Yavapai tribe. He's occasionally traded with her, admired her skill and her quiet dignity. He didn't know why she was here. "Walks with Shadows," Silas said, his voice calmer than he felt. "What are you doing here?" Walks with Shadows didn't answer. She released her arrow. It flew straight and true, not at Silas, but at Skinner. The Skinner leader grunted, clutching his shoulder as the arrow embedded itself in his arm. "Treachery!" Skinner roared, willing to face Walks with Shadows. Chaos erupted. The remaining Skinners scattered, grabbing their weapons and firing wildly. Silas returned fire, dropping one of them instantly. Another dove for cover behind a large boulder. Walks with Shadows loosed another arrow, striking the 4th Skinner in the leg. He cried out in pain, collapsing to the ground. Silas found himself face to face with Skinner. The man was enraged, his eyes filled with a cold fury. He charged, drawing his own Colt Peacemaker. Silas raised his Winchester, but his hands were shaking. He was tired. He was old. He didn't want to die in this dust-choked hell. Just as Skinner pulled the trigger, Walks with Shadows fired another arrow, this one striking Skinner in the chest. The Skinner leader staggered back, clutching at the feather shaft protruding from his shirt. He collapsed onto the ground, his face contorted in pain. Silas lowered his Winchester, his heart pounding in his chest. He looked at Walks with Shadows, a silent question in his eyes. "He was taking more than money," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "He was taking something sacred. He desecrated a burial ground." Silas understood. That's why she intervened. It wasn't just about justice. It was about honor. It was about protecting something far greater than himself. The remaining Skinner, the one with the wounded leg, tried to make a run for it, but Walks with Shadows stopped him with a well-placed arrow to the back. He didn't stand a chance. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the buzzing of flies and the distant cry of a hawk. Silas felt the strange mix of relief and exhaustion. He's done his job, but he knew this wasn't the end. The desert always claimed its own. "Why did you help me?" Silas asked Walks with Shadows. She looked at him, her eyes filled with a sadness he couldn't quite decipher. "The desert remembers," she said, "and it demands balance." She turned and disappeared into the rocks, leaving Silas alone with the bodies of the Skinners and the ghosts of the past. He collected the reward from the governor, a sum large enough to buy a small piece of land in Missouri. As he prepared to leave Copper Canyon, he saw a single, perfect wildflower blooming amidst the barren landscape, a splash of vibrant color against the monochrome hues of the desert. He picked it, carefully preserving it in his pocket, a reminder of the beauty and the brutality of the American West. He knew he'd be back. The desert had a way of calling men home whether they wanted to go or not, and he had a feeling that Walks with Shadows' words, "The desert remembers," would haunt him for the rest of his days. He started his journey back east, the wildflower pressed carefully inside his hat, a silent promise to seek a peace he knew he might never find. The shadows of Copper Canyon lingered in his mind, a stark reminder of the violent echoes that resonated across the Arizona territory.